who benefited from NIL? Yekselinenborg and Adai Mara. That was great for them. And here's why I love the picks. So we know young players don't work for the Warriors. So Yaxel's going to be like 24 when the season starts. Big personality, long, athletic, and an improving three-point shot. He's going to be a starter or the first guy off the bench. I like it a lot. Young guys don't work there. The offense, the ecosystem between Steph Curry and Kerr, it doesn't work with 18, 19, 20-year-olds. He works. He's big. He fits. Again, excellent defender. Draymond Green, Linda Borg, elite defensive players, which always helps when Steph Curry or stars not. So I love this pick. And he goes to a great organization. He goes from a great college coach in Michigan in the Big Ten where he was the best player to the Warriors. He was playing at a directional Alabama school a year ago and was going to go into the NBA draft. He would have been buried late first, early second. So I think he's a great pick for the Warriors, and I think it's great for the kid. Couldn't be happier for him. I mean, they can handle big personalities. They've got Draymond on the team. He's going to be just fine there. He's a perfect fit for this team. The other thing is Adai Mara.
No, I want to stay focused on the Golden State Warriors here. I genuinely love this selection. I love it because it brings such tremendous positional flexibility to the roster, and it's someone who can produce an immediate contribution right away. This franchise is so remarkable. I was actually discussing this very topic with my father yesterday because we were breaking down the draft and trying to project where all these prospects would land. And for my part, this is simply my personal methodology. I'm not claiming this is the definitive correct approach, but it's always challenging to predict how a collegiate player's game will translate to the NBA level. That's precisely why I joked when James was discussing that Connect platform or whatever it was called, and he was saying, "Oh, I knew he would excel in this system or that situation." And I'm thinking, what happened to all that certainty? The reality is that nobody truly knows how these things will unfold. However, my process involves assessing what a team requires from a size and strength perspective, from a versatility standpoint, from speed, from roster depth. Like, what do you need when you're just looking at the measurable attributes on paper, the physical characteristics and athletic profiles that a prospect possesses, right? That's what I examine first and foremost. And this particular prospect represents exactly what the Warriors have essentially never had on their roster. That's what makes their sustained success so remarkable, how they've managed to construct competitive teams over these years and capture championships and genuinely become the last great dynasty the NBA has witnessed. Truly the last dominant franchise that the league has seen in the last decade or so, depending on where you want to establish that cutoff point. I suppose yes, it would be the previous decade. And it continues to astonish me. And the question becomes, how were they able to compensate for that deficiency? Because Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and obviously adding Kevin Durant, which represents a unique circumstance because you had him both with and without Durant. So, it's somewhat of a mixed bag there because obviously you have that period with KD. But it's just so unbelievable. And it's largely attributable to Steph's remarkable resilience, his conditioning regimen, his own speed and quickness, right? He's not a burner in the conventional athletic sense, but when you observe his movement and see how he can continuously navigate screens and create separation in ways reminiscent of his 2016 and 2017 peak. Not quite the same level currently, but still performing at an extraordinarily high tier, just different in execution. The shooting prowess and the overall construction of that roster is so uniquely configured. And they need to progress beyond that model. And that's precisely what this draft selection accomplishes, in my estimation. But before I continue further, please, Golden State Warriors sue. Porters, do not forget to subscribe and watch the complete video in its entirety, as that is unequivocally the most effective method to support the continued growth of this channel, enabling me to continue producing the most impartial, measured, and candid conversations regarding the Golden State Warriors. It makes an enormous difference, and I would be extremely grateful for your support. But yes, this pick represents exactly the type of player, let me be perfectly clear about this. This is the stylistic profile, unless you already have a superstar or genuinely elite talent filling that particular role, that body type, that playing style, this is consistently, invariably what I'm seeking. Always what I'm looking for. Every team in the league could benefit from this archetype. Any organization could utilize such a player. 6'9", 240 pounds, exceptional defender, physical presence, toughness, energy, commitment, high motor. You could insert him onto the Spurs roster and he would have generated an immediate impact and potentially propelled them to a championship, right? That's the point I'm making here. Immediate contribution. Place him on the Sixers, instant upgrade. Absolutely immediate. Simply by virtue of his sheer size, as long as you possess even a rudimentary understanding of how to play basketball at the NBA level, as long as you demonstrate even a baseline level of basketball intelligence, you are going to be able to make a meaningful contribution. At min. You're going to provide a defensive presence and secure some physical rebounds, right? At the absolute minimum threshold. So, that alone has me thinking, yes. For example, I cite the Sixers as an illustration. They drafted, his name has completely escaped my memory at this moment, but he's approximately 6'4", and I'm thinking, folks, how are you deploying all these smaller guards out there? You already have Maxey, you have VJ Edgecombe, and it's just, and I specifically mentioned this because it was part of my conversation with my father. I told him, they're not the Warriors. They're not going to be able to get away with this approach. And I'm certain other teams can find alternative pathways to success, but you're relying heavily on a lot of factors here. You're depending on a lot to go right. You need more positional versatility. You need more size. You need more physicality. You simply need this type of player. And they didn't have it. And that's precisely what the Warriors are constructing here. And I just think there's such incredible versatility. And I want to be very precise about what I'm not asserting. I'm not merely saying, oh, size and strength alone, right? Because obviously, if that were the case, then every player who was simply big and strong would automatically be exceptional at basketball. That's clearly not what I'm suggesting. Again, I believe there's just such a well-rounded skill set and maturity to his game. To his overall game. You're not bringing in a 19 or 20-year-old project. You're bringing in someone who already possesses a fully developed adult physique and someone who has already been putting in the necessary work. And I apologize, but when there is a degree of on-court maturity present, and again, I'm not necessarily referring to emotional or psychological maturity in a general sense. I'm specifically talking about basketball maturity, right? All related to on-court decision-making and composure. The Warriors are going to be able to cultivate that even further. This is an environment where Steve Kerr can truly excel. This is where the relationships with Curry and Draymond can make a significant difference. I've discussed this previously, probably not recently on this channel, but I have addressed it more extensively on my football channel. There are different coaching styles, different organizational cultures, different layers where certain coaches are exceptionally skilled at developing players and nurturing their growth. Then you have other coaches, other cultures, other players who are exceptional at integrating all the pieces together, right? That's Steve Kerr. That's Phil Jackson. There are different ways that coaches excel at different aspects. Cultures are more conducive to different approaches. And so, that's why I keep emphasizing on-court maturity. You always need off-court maturity, but that's always in flux. That's always evolving. That can change at any given moment. 1 second. Do you become a superstar? The next it feels like you're about to secure a $200 million contract. You have the $200 million contract. They're interviewing you post-game. That's always somewhat difficult to gauge in terms of where someone's head is at. So sometimes, especially in the early stages of a career, you see players who appear quite humble and grounded and seem to be trying to do all the right things. And then in an instant, everything transforms. So off-court maturity isn't always the easiest attribute to predict. On-court maturity, I believe you have a clearer sense of because you're observing it in real time and it shouldn't fluctuate too dramatically regardless of how much money you're earning or how famous you become, because if you possess on-court maturity, then you understand what needs to be accomplished. You know what you need to do in order to win games and maximize your potential. If you lack that understanding, then you simply don't have on-court maturity. That's my perspective on the matter. And again, just because you have on-court maturity doesn't mean you can't display emotion on the court. It doesn't mean you can't receive a technical foul. It doesn't mean you can't be exuberant and vocal and make occasional mistakes, right? Draymond Green possesses on-court maturity even though on the surface you might think, he's Draymond Green. So again, when I use the term on-court maturity, I'm applying a very specific, narrow definition. I'll try to Develop a more comprehensive way to articulate that definition and provide additional examples of other players who exemplify what I mean by that. Obviously LeBron, Steph, KD. So yes, I'm just genuinely excited that the Warriors acquired one of those players who feels like they not only can make an impact relatively quickly, but they also represent that intersection of style and player type that they have desperately needed essentially throughout their entire championship run, throughout their entire dynasty period. Right? Like that to me is what generates so much enthusiasm. I am so thrilled about a young, athletic, tough, physical, fast, 6'9", 240-pound, 23-year-old prospect. I'm so excited for that. The best example I can reference because it's the most recent is a lower-tier rookie. Well, not exactly lower tier because he had considerable success and was a top rookie candidate, Matisse Thybulle with the Sixers. And again, he's like 6'3", 6'4". He's strong. You could tell that he's already fairly muscular. So, he's putting in the work and has a great attitude with on-court maturity through the roof. Just a genuinely enjoyable player to support and root for and anticipate further development. But you could observe, particularly during the playoffs, that for me, I guess, the 6'3", 6'4" and anything below that, I'm always slightly uneasy once the postseason begins. I'm always concerned, and Street F. Curry is actually probably one of the best representations of that dynamic. Because you see just how extraordinary Steph needs to be to make an impact in the playoffs. With this, you see how he is truly one of a kind. Truly, truly, truly one of a kind. You can observe how even someone like Jalen Brunson, who ultimately went on to win it all and achieve success, you could still see that there's a certain fragility there. Is this greatness sustainable or can we win this way? Right? You see that concern. And that's kind of always been the Warriors to some degree. There's always been this strange combination of both fragility and resiliency where in any given moment, it's like, man, this team just might not be able to navigate their way through this challenge. But they're so historically gifted, so historically great. That's why, especially in their prime, they were notoriously down by like 15 to 20 points at any given moment, right? And then they come out in the third quarter and flip the switch, right? Because there is that fragility. The same thing that, honestly, strangely enough, occurred with the New York Knicks. And especially obviously in the finals, right? There's this weird level of fragility, but also resilience. It's like a peculiar phenomenon. And it's time for the Warriors to simply possess more resilience. Just have more resilience. No more fragility. They need that. I believe they've acquired it. And I'm fired up about it. I'm genuinely fired up. Hopeful. LLY that all made sense. I was pulling out a lot of different terminology and a lot of different definitions, but I'm genuinely excited. This is because this is literally what I was discussing with my father at like 1 a.m. because we were talking about the draft and all these other prospects and what teams require. And I was specifically, talking about the Warriors and the Sixers. So it's actually quite amusing that there's that intersection for me that fits perfectly. And what I was saying about Jellicoe was that if you got that level of production out of Jellicoe, but he was like 6'6" or something, we're looking at a completely different team. And you saw it against the Celtics. You saw Jason Tatum. You saw Jaylen Brown. You could see their size and strength and the difference it makes in the game in a more physical, rugged contest. Now again, obviously I know the Sixers still ended up winning, but regardless, you could see it as clear as day. So I love this pick. I love it. I love it. I love it. I'm so happy. I'm so thrilled. But those are just my perspectives. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you all think about the Golden State Warriors? How they're positioning themselves for the future. Do you think it's a little too late? Do you think they still have what it takes to construct a legitimate championship caliber team? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single comment. Whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's generate some discussions, let's have some spirited debates, but ultimately, let's ensure we're having fun. Please do consider subscribing. We're cultivating an amazing community here. I would absolutely love to see you become part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're truly excited to be part of. I believe we're making excellent progress toward that goal. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up as it genuinely assists with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.